Well, good evening, everyone. This is our October presentation of Off the Beaten Track, and our guest layout presenter tonight is David Woodhead. David lives in Ontario, Canada, and has quite a background in a variety of things, including interest in HON3 and going back to Hornby?
Yeah,
And
Hornby wind up.
all right, well, David, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, some of it's in the slides, although which you'll see. But the Hornby windup is interesting because that's a particularly Canadian thing that you get when you're, 3 or 4 years old. Your parents might have gotten you. We're talking about the early 50s here for me. You might have got a Hornby windup, which is O gauge and tin plate. Quite neat stuff. You see it in shows around Ontario still. Probably don't see it down in the States very much.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
so you are a professional musician
correct.
and have produced some of your own work.
Yeah, yeah, quite a
All
bit of
right,
it. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
If anybody's really interested, I have a website which is just myname.com, davidwoodhead.com. And there's music, music, music. But what you really want is the railway page. So up on the top of the banner, you'll see the railway page, and that'll take you to my layout.
Very good. Well, tonight you were going to describe your ON3 layout and the many aspects of it as you've developed it over the years. So please proceed.
The Madoc and North Hastings Railroad, this is a freelance or proto-lance or let's say informed freelance ON3 railroad in my basement. I live in Toronto, and my house was built around 1910. So conditions are a little cramped down here, and you'll see pictures of that later. But what I like to do is I've planned and built my layout really kind of for fantasy photography. In a way, what I'd like to portray is a place that I'd really like to be, that I'd like to be standing here watching trains. I'd like to get on this train and take it down the line. And so I've drawn from a bunch of different sources to get that. And, I'm not modeling one particular railroad. I don't think I could sit still long enough to have a long enough attention span to actually do that. But what I like to do is give the atmosphere of this time and place. In this case, it would be sort of central Ontario up in the Canadian Shield around 1900, 1890s up to the First World War, more or less time period. Here's another shot. This is just to convey an atmosphere. We've got some shadow going on here. I've put in a Photoshop sky, which I really like doing. My actual backdrop is plain blue. It's, a nondescript blue background with not much on it. But that gives me the very simple steps in Photoshop to take that away and produce something else. Here, this sky is nothing special. It's sort of some very simple cloud effects, but it really adds to the scene. Here's another one. I really like shooting it, making my pictures black and white, just taking the color away and then maybe doing some film treatment on them just to give that atmosphere of a time and place that I would like to have been, or I'd like to visit. So here's the reality of it. It's an around the walls layout. It's 16 by 23. So basically the railroad starts here, goes around. There's a one station in the middle called Hackney where we can do meets, and there's Bessemer Branch is basically just a one-track staging yard in there. And then you get around to Coe Hill, and Dorset is similarly a one-track staging yard off here. In the middle is work area, and I'll show you pictures of that later on. I think that's really important to have that high percentage of your railroad room designated as work area. That's just sort of the way it evolved for me, and I don't think I'm going to change it. Here's what you see when you look in the room. So regardless of what the fantasy is, when you shoot close up, when you stand there with your camera and shoot left, this is what you see. quite a messy kind of situation, actually. I never did put any kind of valencing or curtains under the layout. That's something I'd like to get around to, I guess, dress it up a bit. But, and here's looking the other way from the doorway. So as you come in and look right, this is what you'd see. So going back, here's my origins. Besides the Hornby windup, by 1963, I had started an HO, and with my dad, I was getting Model Railroader magazine. And that's me in the Black Hills in South Dakota. That's a family vacation that we did. And there at the time was the Black Hills Central, which was running a 3-foot gauge White Pass and Yukon 280, number 69. Outside frame, really interesting stuff. So all of a sudden I was exposed to narrow gauge, and lo and behold, it was just amazingly interesting. And coincidentally, the June 1963 issue of MR featured narrow gauge. The whole issue was pretty much narrow gauge. And so we've got Jack Alexander's modeling. He was actually in Pennsylvania, but he was modeling very much influenced by Colorado, as you can see. And it had some main 2-foot gauge stuff. It had the big level in Pennsylvania, an article on that. It had ads for PFM, the RGS number 20460 in there, in brass, in ON3 and HON3. So I began to be aware of all this stuff in this other world. So as time went on, I got more into scratch building, and but in HO standard gauge, there wasn't really anything available to me. I was living in Ottawa by this time, Ottawa, Ontario. And so I scratch built that bridge, and these are jack work gondola cars. You may remember articles around in the 60s by Jack Work, very prolific writer, great modeler, very inspiring. That, of course, is River Aussie 440. And then eventually, by the late 70s, early 80s, I was in HON3, and much to my roommates, well, I have to give him credit for putting up with my HON3 layout, which went down the hall of our apartment and into the living room. So thank you, Zeke. Zeke has now passed away, but he was a fiddle player who I shared a place with here in Toronto by this time. And so then by this time in the 90s and early O's, I had kids. We did garden railroading in the backyard. And my layout was featured in an 8-page article, actually, in Garden Railways magazine, which was quite amazing. But by the end of the O's, I was really much more focused on developing ON3. Now, in Canada, we have all kinds of different narrow gauges. There's a number of books about it. One of the best books is by Rod Clark on the Toronto Grey and Bruce and Toronto and Nipissing, which were 3-foot 6-gauge railways in the 1870s. They were standard gauge in the 1880s, so this didn't last long, but a fascinating period of narrow gauge. And so this locomotive here, that was actually built in England. And this is a Boltman 280, not unlike C16s or C19s, although the driver spacing, as you can see, is a little different, kind of interesting. Then we have a Mason bogie. You'll see a Mason bogie on my layout later on. And this one was built for use in New Brunswick in Eastern Canada. So now here's where fantasy meets reality. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. This is Central Ontario. So you've got Lake Ontario down here, and the sort of limestone flats here, and the Canadian Shield, much rougher country up here. You can sort of see by the lake patterns, in fact, the difference in terrain. So what's interesting here is that in the 1870s, this line, the Belleville, this is Belleville down here, Belleville and North Hastings was proposed as a 3-foot gauge, 3-foot 6 gauge railway. That's the colonial gauge, you know, that's what we had up here. And so in my world, it actually did get built as narrow gauge, although 3-foot, and extended up into the Canadian Shield Company country up here, where there's quite a considerable amount of mines. In fact, here's the town of Coe Hill, which is on my layout, Coe Hill Mines. And this went further up to Bancroft and other places. Very interesting stuff. There's iron mining here. There's a little place called Bessemer, which is the name of the branch line to the mines on my layout. So I'm sort of taking over where this railroad, the Central Ontario, which was built later, would have gone. Now, I do have lots of interest in American narrow gauge, in the 3-foot gauge lines through Ohio, Pennsylvania. Here we have Newport and Sherman's Valley. That was kind of 2 valleys east of the East Broad Top. And a really nice little book on that is available. And just one of those little lines that serviced, you can see piles of lumber here, agricultural products, and of course, passenger trains up its valley. The Ohio River in Western, a lot of you know, great book on that called Hidden Treasures. And the Waynesburg in Washington, in West Union, Pennsylvania. I was just at the Pittsburgh convention, and I did a little side trip with my partner, traveling partner, Dave Pennington, down to Waynesburg and saw their 260 number 4, which has been beautifully restored, not operating, but beautifully restored. And we also visited one of the stations on the line at Swart, Pennsylvania, S-W-A-R-T, Swart, Pennsylvania. It's a great name. And beautifully preserved, actually, oddly enough, like whatever it is, almost 90 years after the railroad quit. Although it was converted to standard gauge, actually, this Waynesburg in Washington. And the Pennsylvania tried to run their 060s on it, but didn't work out. Curves are too sharp, and all they could do was run rail trucks on it. Really interesting story. Here's some more Eastern narrow gauge, New Berlin and Winfield, and there was some of you may remember the little 260 that was brought in as a brass import, and that's the prototype there. Chateauguay Railway, there's no book on this. I think there should be, but really interesting line west of Plattsburgh, New York, right up near the Canadian border, actually, in the Adirondacks. Hauling iron ore and passengers and tourists. The West River Railroad, that's another nice one that went up from Brattleboro, Vermont, down near the Connecticut border. So back to the layout here. We're going to take you on a little trip around the layout. We're going to start in this place called Windrum, where it's really the main sort of terminal, the hub of the railway. You've got, oh, I'll go back here. So we've got iron ore traffic. There's an ore dock here and another proposed ore dock here. We'll see a picture of that. And of course, the main engine terminal. But otherwise, a very simple track plan. This is not a high traffic railroad. And it's pretty interesting when 2 trains come into town and they have to switch around and deal with each other. That's a nice challenge. We like that. Here's looking up the main throat of the yard here. This is a station built by Trevor Marshall, and it is, I think it's Strong, actually. It might be Phillips, but a really nice interior in it, and it's perfect for this style of railway, being a main prototype. And this little van here, this is I got from the post office. The post office was selling these little die-cast vintage mail trucks. And I cut it down a little bit, painted the bright, shiny silver parts black, and I got myself a Canadian Royal Mail truck there. Here's a good example of the sky. I really enjoy getting that sort of bright sunny day look, matching it to the lighting on the layout. And we'll see a few more examples of that and ways that we can play around with that. This is looking the other way. There's that station, and there's that mail truck, and just a pile of stuff in the foreground. Here's an overall view of Windrum, showing the turntable area, and here's this control panel down here. Now, this whole section of the layout, this whole yard, was built by Stan Windrum, probably, I think, through the 80s, by the late 80s. He is another member of our Maple Leaf Modelers or Maple Leaf Mafia kind of group that we have here in Ontario, and he's passed away now. And our mutual friend Don McMurrick and I manhandled this huge piece of layout down my basement stairs, and I've set it up here. It has twin coil switch machines operated by these red buttons on this control panel, and which I really enjoy. I really like hearing ka-chunk, that kind of sound. You know, it's tempting to replace them with something a little bit more modern, but I really don't mind it at all. I've had to replace a couple of them, but they're not hard to find at local railroad flea markets. These switches here, this is all for the turntable. That's a power supply for the turntable, and on and off switches for the storage tracks, locomotive tracks. Here's a good example of lighting and Photoshop sky. It looks kind of cold. It's a bright sunny day. There's not snow on the ground, but you really get a feeling of weather here. There's bare trees. That's part of the Photoshop part, actually, in this case. And those are actually more of Trevor Marshall's buildings. I really enjoy the fact that they're kind of white and well kept looking. Not everything is weathered wood. I am modeling sort of 1900, 1910, so things are still fairly well kept. Or not, it's not the 30s yet. Of course, we have ore cars coming in and out of the yard, and the Heisler here, this is a Bachmann Heisler, which we'll see more of later, is just came in with this 3-car train, and Shay back here is going to be doing some switching once the Heisler is let go. And these ore cars, these are made, these are actually injected molded plastic ON30 cars converted to ON3 by Prairie Locomotive Works. He had some at the show at Pittsburgh, and I asked him what his stock was like, because I know that that was pretty much his only product for a while. But he does have some on hand, so if anybody's interested, they should get in touch before they disappear. It's Prairie Locomotive Works. And there's also a bunch of these. These are classic miniatures / Taurus models, wood ore cars, which I've modified with these slope sheets visible on the ends, and wood verticals, stake puddle there, but instead of the plastic Grant Line ones. I didn't like the look of those. I didn't think that they'd look well with the stained car. And looking back in time here, this is something I mocked up. This is a Backwoods Miniatures vertical boiler locomotive from an English prototype, but this would be make-believe early days down at the town of Windrum. These are Grant Line coal cars. These are the plastic ones, and that's a little brass etched kit made by Duton Models, or Duton, from France, that I picked up. Where did I find that? Online somewhere. Now, the little staging yard that I keep, I send the ore cars to, this is at the sort of south end of the yard. It's really a placeholder, I guess. I'd like to have a better place to send ore cars, but for now it's shielded from all my heavy duty workbench here by this picture frame. And a friend of mine gave me this picture, and I didn't really care for the subject, but I really like the frame, and it just fits exactly right here. So that's just perfect. And it's hinged, so if I want to access a car there, I can hinge that up and reach inside. Here's the other end of the yard with the track leaving town here that we're going to head under there. And this ore dock here, this ore transfer dock, that is from Craig Webb's layout. I discussed Craig Webb's Fallen Flag layout a few months ago. And I ended up with this ore dock and a few other things. And this is more or less where it's going to go. I'm going to cut in a switch into the main line here, and so I can send ore cars over to there and be dumping them into probably a standard gauge siding underneath it. And so before we leave Windrum, these are photos by Stan Windrum, who built the yard, and he was quite a talented photographer. I just love the texture he's getting, the lighting and texture he's getting on this shot. And this is that turntable that's still on my layout now. So here we are again. We're leaving Windrum, and we're going to go under this awkward ceiling beam. There's a few taller members of our group who have a little trouble with that ceiling beam. I just barely fit under it. So we're going to emerge out here in the town of Hackney. And here's Hackney. So we're going to come out here over the bridge and to the passing siding. Here's the Bessemer branch, and Bessemer was a real iron mine branch off the Central Ontario Railway up near Bancroft. So here we are having a meet at the siding at Hackney. This is the branch down to the Solway ceramic supply, which we'll see more of later too. This is a Lentz DCC. That's what I use. That's something else that Trevor Marshall got me into. He was using Lentz, and I've sort of stuck with it. It's just fine. It's not radio, or it's not a cell phone or anything like that, but it does the job for me. It's wired, and I've got a few of these controllers that plug in around the layout. So the interesting thing about Hackney is that I changed my concept of this town a couple of times actually, but here's the original idea. This is Waynesburg in Washington Hackney prototype. And I just like the idea of having the passing siding and the station on a curve with the hills lurking there behind and some random buildings up there. Actually, I think that this is the main line, and this is the siding, and they see there's a car sitting there on the siding. Quite often for unloading, they'd have the siding actually closer to the station, which is not something that I would have thought of, but that's often the case with these kind of lines. And here's my rendition of it. What I'd done was there are plans in the 3 Feet on the Panhandle book on the W&W, and I blew them up to 1/4 inch scale and glued them onto foam core and made a mock-up of the station just to see how it was surprisingly big. Actually, it just barely fits in there. So that's one of the things that led to my redesigning the area. So what I'm going with was with a passenger stop on each end of the passing siding rather than have the passenger stop in the middle. So this end is the hotel, and the sort of hotel here, a picnic area up here. So both those things are from Craig Webb's layout. And I've sort of redesigned the hotel. I've cut it down and made it, I think his was just about a building flat. So I've made it kind of L-shaped. And so that is served by this, you probably recognize that. That's a Grizzly Flats station, and quite a fancy station for the hotel. And then people will be able to go across a little suspension bridge over this stream here and climb up the steep path to get to their picnic area. And here's an example of the kind of hotel that I'm looking at here. This is actually in Ainsworth, British Columbia, on Kootenay Lake, and it still exists, as far as I know. So next, at the other end of Hackney, I'm actually drawing from yet another Waynesburg in Washington scene. So this is Van Kirk, Pennsylvania, which is roughly halfway, I guess, between Waynesburg and Washington. And what I really liked about this scene is this whitewashed retaining wall and the whitewashed supports for this little shelter station. That's a Pennsylvania Railroad design, and there were plans for that in the book as well. I also really like the way that the train is starting up here. It looks like he's putting some effort into getting the train rolling, and this guy standing here in the baggage door. That's really nice. So here's my version of that. So you see the white retaining wall, just whitewashed, basically just thinned white acrylic, and just sort of applied helter-skelter with a wide brush to make it look messy. And of course, I did the same thing for the supports. Normally, those would be sort of a dark or weathered wood looking. you know, grays and browns. I did alter it in that I did add the stairs, which are not on the prototype, obviously. But halfway through constructing this scene, I realized that there was really no way for the passengers to get up from the busy area down here where the wagons, and that's part of a wagon right there, where the wagons would be accessing. They had to get up somehow to the train level, so I made some stairs. Here's some of my scenery process. So I have all these tubs, you know, that's cottage cheese, that's, you know, sand, it's cottage cheese, cottage cheese container full of stuff. There's all these various kinds of ground cover and sand and bits of stuff left over from other projects that I can draw upon for making ground cover. And this, of course, is diluted carpenter's glue with the classic eyedropper and tweezers for working on this stuff. And this is the way that this looks from above. Here's some more ideas here. Scenic Express, of course, super trees, even little bits of them sprayed brown with some leaf scatter. These spreadable mats, and they come in various colors and densities and brand names, but those are really great. They just sort of loosen up the look of a landscape in however big you want to spread that out. They're wonderful to work with. And then, of course, there's moss. Here's another tub of like broken up small branches. I have all kinds of stuff like this. Too much. So here's the north end of Hackney as it's sort of more or less finished. And down here is the branch line. It's just basically two sidings serving the Solway ceramic supply. So they're dealing in feldspar and bagged clay products. Now, the story behind that building is Schomburg Scale Models produced the Solway Pottery Supply Company as a kit, as a resin kit. And my partner in here is Nancy Solway, who is a potter, and he actually named the kit after Nancy, which is really nice. So of course I had to have one. So leaving Solway, that's Solway over on the left. We're leaving Hackney now. We're heading up the sort of elevated main line. And I really like the way that this ended up, because I positioned the main line away from the front of the layout and raised it up so that you're looking, it's really easy to look up at the trains going by. And the next thing we're going to come to is a trestle. So the prototype, here's yet another Winsberg and Washington reference for all you fans out there. This is Bonham trestle, and there's a part of this which still exists. I didn't get to see it this trip, but there's a few bents of this trestle that do actually still exist in place. This is the whole scene looking overall. There's Solway ceramic over there on the left. This is an area that I just did this year with this dock, this forest, and of course the water. The water is a layer of woodland scenics, it's called deep water. And you can sort of see how things were not exactly leveled because the water, this is the deep water here. You can see how deep it is there and how shallow it is here. Well, that's just because things just weren't level. But it's great stuff. And I used a slight tint on it, sort of a murky, muddy kind of tint, and then overlaid the whole thing once it was dry with Mod Podge, which is like an acrylic matte medium, or gloss medium. And I just applied that with a brush, using the brush to create these ripples. So just my brush strokes were always left to right until I felt like I liked the way that it looked, and I moved on to the next part. Quite a simple thing, but it took me a while, a little practice to really develop that. The dock here is made of real twigs from the backyard. I just selected ones that were straight enough to use. So you've got a major log under here, and then other logs going crossways, smaller ones, and then boards sitting on top, and plenty of real docks. In fact, I built a dock pretty much real dock like that up at our cottage, which is about 3 hours north of Toronto, up in the the Canadian Shield Country. So here we are looking closer up at the edge of the water here, and you saw how shallow that water was, especially on this right-hand side. I'm very happy with the way that this effect worked of just the actual base that I was working on is just a piece of plywood painted black, and then with various shades of tan and brown, creating what looks like the shallows. So I want to blend this shallow part with the shoreline and make it look like this is the same stuff as that, but just submerged. So just by fading it out and just diluting it, I was able to create this feeling that of depth and shallow. I'm really very pleased with that. And there we have a climax going by. That's one of those Flying Zoo 18-ton climaxes. And RGS number 40. This is an Art Midwood locomotive, originally owned by his dad, and Harold Midwood. Both of them are amazing, or were amazing brass builders and modifiers. This is a precision scale C19, and I just couldn't resist having one of his locomotives on the layout, even though it's a few thousand miles out of place. And here's another case in which I can, using the Photoshop background, I can make it all of a sudden seem like we're in the mountainous part of Colorado, although those mountains are actually from Banff, Alberta, the ones that I used for the background. Now, here we are. There's the trestle on the left, and this is the way things looked when they're underway. I haven't gotten my forest here yet, and we'll see how I develop this swamp area over here. That's next. So we're coming around to the corner, and here's the swamp. I always wanted to do a swamp. And this is more Woodland Scenics Deep Water and Mod Podge combination, although I wasn't going for many ripples here because it's such a small body of water, and I wanted to keep it murkier looking. What I did that's a little different here is that I'm using a tuft technique with these clumps of bulrushes and weeds. So what I do is I drill about a 3/16 hole in the plaster and plywood, whatever's underneath it, and I grab a bunch of materials. In this case, one or two of these bulrush, I can't remember where they're from. I think they're just commercial bulrushes from somewhere, and a few different materials. So I've got some brown stuff, I've got some green stuff, I've got some coarse stuff, I've got some fine stuff, and just twirl that around in my fingers until I get a nice looking, interesting clump. Use a pair of scissors to trim off the bottom so that it's blunt, and then just jam it in the hole and then spread it around a bit so that it doesn't look like one thing that you jammed in there. The idea is to have that variety of texture and color. You'll see that is a beaver there. There's some lily pads here. Those are from various sources. I've sort of mixed things up quite a bit. What I often do when I'm doing scenery is I put up a card table in the room so I can put all my materials on it and then just choose what I want. But because every time I visit a hobby store, there's pretty much nothing in ON3, so I often just buy whatever scenery products there are. Probably a lot of you have had that same experience. This is the same scene, but with a slightly different angle. And of course, that's a Grant Line 18-ton porter. This over here, that's a Tom York plaster building, actually, in the Buildings series. Quite nice, actually. Here's that same scene. Actually, this is before I really did the water in the swamp, but I just like the way this particular picture turned out using the grain effect in Photoshop to give it a really very antique look. Okay, here we are. The swamp was down here, and there's the trestle. So trestle, swamp, And now we're coming around to the town of Coe Hill. This is sort of an industrial town here. And the outskirts, the railroad station is actually kind of in the outskirts. So to get that, we're looking into the corner of the room here. So that, I know, of course, photoshopped out the corner. There's no other way. And put in a rather puffy cloud kind of sky in this case. So there's that porter again. And this yellow building was a chooch country store or general store, whichever. And instead of using the false front and using it as a general store, I just wanted the wall sections. So I'm using both the left and right hand wall sections here with a fairly obvious join if you look closely, but what I wanted was a sort of a feature building, and I made it yellow just because there wasn't anything yellow around. And I rather than have another, boxcar red kind of building or gray weathered wood, I wanted to have something that really popped out. There's that cement mixer, by the way, that won the award at the Pittsburgh convention. Here's the overall view of Coe Hill. There's that yellow building over here. That's a feed and seed kind of supply area. And this station here, it's another Trevor Marshall building. And we'll talk about this engine house later on when we get to it. So here's more water. Last winter I got on a real water kick. So this is all Mod Podge. There's actually at least two kinds of Mod Podge. One of them is a much harder one. So I had a couple of layers of the hard one as an experiment. Again, just over painted plywood, nothing fancier than that. And you can see over here how I've done some more shallow painting before I apply any of the water effects, and some more tufts of various kinds here. And another log dock. Just love those log docks. These Muskoka chairs, we call them Muskoka chairs, but they're also known as Adirondack chairs across the border. Those are mini prints, 3D printed ones that are done here in Toronto, but he's got a very good online print presence. Here we are. Here's a close-up looking at the station. This is, I think it's Carabasset on the Sandy River. Is the prototype for this station model, and that Trevor built. And what I did with it was I supported it with these limestone piers, just blocks of limestone piled up and supporting the building. And that gives me a really neat opportunity to just pile a bunch of junk under there, some old pipes and a wheel and whatever that is. All kinds of odds and ends I can just sort of throw under there and make it look interesting. Here's the other end of the building. That's that Max Gray Mason Bogey. We'll see that more. And one thing that caught my eye just looking at this again was the spoked wheels in the tender. It didn't come with spoked wheels, but I replaced them with some Bachmann wheels that I had. Here's another shot. There's that station in the background. And I have to tip my hat off to Matt Woods here. I attended his clinic, and this shot, although it's a couple of years old, reminds me of his work. He has a really nice way of dealing with open space. So that's what this picture is about. It'd be easy to clutter it up with some more rolling stock or more figures or whatever. I think it's got the one figure sitting over here on a log, but I really designed this to conjure up what the real landscape looks like. So in spite of the fact that this is right in the middle of my yard, there's not much going on. It's kind of a quiet feel to this area. So you've got what looks like a kind of a field here with sort of brush grown fence line. That's another thing that Matt has really pointed out is hedgerows and things like that. Not much going on here, just just random sort of ground cover. And all the railroad interest in this picture is crammed over here on the left, leaving all that space. Space is so important. Here's looking the slightly different shot of the same area, but showing the engine house, some more grass tufts and things like that. And another little vignette there with the guy sitting on the crane. Now here's the engine house with number 14. That's Northwest Short Line 440. That locomotive has served me well, actually. You know, they don't all run that well, but this one seems to do very well. And I got that off our friend and fellow Maple Leaf modeler group guy, Larry McDonald. And I redetailed it a bit and added DCC. Great model. This is one of Craig Webb's cars, letter for the Agoma River. And that is a Wiseman Models coach there on the end. The old V&T shots, he's got them. This wagon here, I must say, this is a nice one. This is Zeodon models. That's a few years ago. They've been out of production for a while, but very finely cast, very thin walls in front on that. Very nice models. I've got a few more of them. Great stuff. Here's that engine house. Now this is patterned after the Newport and Sherman's Valley engine house in Pennsylvania. That's the line that's a little bit east of the East Broad Top. And a nice book on that. And here's a couple of photos from the book. This is the photos were illustrating the standard gauge and narrow gauge transfer with this guy here, taking whatever it is, putting them into the narrow gauge cars. But what I was really interested in was the engine house. Now, I didn't have quite enough width to model it full width, but I managed to compress it enough to be believable. I thought it was really important to have a two-stall engine house. And you know, when you think logistically of the approach track, the turntable, and one stall, it's kind of a traffic jam, right? You can only have you have to get everything out of the way if you want that locomotive to come out. So I thought that having a two-stall engine house made that things much more versatile, and so I managed to fit it in. But I scratch built this, and you'll see these windows here, these 9x9 the double hung windows. I managed to cobble those together. Here they are from Grant Line, and these are Grant Line up here, of course, and as are the smokestacks. All this stuff back here, that's scratch built just from board and batten and commercial windows. So there's a couple of locomotives sitting there in the sun. Now workspaces. Remember back in my layout plan, I had noted that the whole middle of the layout room is really workspace and storage. Starting over here by the door, we have sort of what I call the heavy area. It's really heavy timbers holding that stuff up. Although this actually looks like I've slid it forward for some reason in this photo. I just noticed that. And there's that picture frame hiding the ore transfer track. In the middle of the room, this is the one that is the most negotiable, and I keep drawing layout plans for this. My latest idea is some stuff in Proto 48 with a 3-foot gauge interchange. You know, to get into some 19th century Proto 48 would be a real challenge, and I've started to accumulate some models to that end. But honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ready to give up this work area. This is just so useful to be able to spread out stuff like this. There's that ore dock over there, and the main line disappearing into the divider between the two halves of the room. Here's my desk area. There's the door to the layout room over there, just to get you oriented. So this was my dad's desk, and that's where I do sit down, like close-up modeling. You can tell I'm left-handed, actually. I just noticed that because all my tools are on the left. And this is one of those magnetic strips here for holding files and whatnot. Those are very useful. And here's the fourth area. This is, I sit on a stool most of the time working on this one. I've got a TAG lathe, and now I have a TAG milling machine over here. That, of course, is an Ultimation sander, which many of you have. And one of the best things that I did was put these two lamps up here, these movable lamps, so that I can zero in on whatever I'm working on. If I'm working on the lathe, they'll both reach over there and illuminate my work from two different directions. So I'm not dealing with intense shadow. That is really a handy thing. I mean, it could have been, fluorescent strip up here, but I find it really handy to move my lamps in on my work. That's a really, I don't know, just thought of that. I don't know where I saw that, but I can recommend it. Okay, so here's some of the work that I do at that workbench. Here's the Bachmann Heisler. I got this as a basket case at a show, but it actually, the mechanism was fine. I had to do some repair on it. And in the meantime, I built a brass bunker, more similar to the sort of post 1903, 1905 Heisler designs, which had this distinctive curve there. I really wanted that. And it has a little bit of beading around on the brass there. And also this curve above the cab window. That's another slightly later design than the Bachmann model has. Another project here, locomotive project. I really like the Porter Bell 060s. That's a Colorado Central one, but there are smaller ones for Old Nantucket, Peach Bottom, all kinds of different lines had these. 060s as all-purpose road locomotives. So what I realized, and I had plans, and I had a whole box of parts from Bill Meredith at Leadville Shops, and I realized that I had one of these Flying Zoo Argent Lumber Company 260s, and yes, that's a Porter. Yes, it has slightly inclined cylinders like the smaller ones, smaller 060s do. It's just a much later version with these rounded domes, steel cab. So I basically stripped it, and I wanted to elevate the cab, so I had to make new firebox sides and all this kind of stuff. New valve gear hanger here, modified pilot. This is about as far as I've got into real brass building here. It's modifying this one, and that's the way it looks now. I still haven't lettered it. I don't know, maybe you've seen this picture before, but I still haven't lettered it, believe it or not. Before we leave, here's what we do with operations. And I've had members of our group, of several different groups actually, over here operating with me, but I can operate by myself and keep myself entertained following this sequence. So, Dave Adams was talking about timetable and train order. And then he noted that you can also do operation without any clock using a sequence. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So here's the sequence of trains that I've got. So of course, time is going from left to right. Here's Cohill, Hackney, Windrum. Those are the main stations, and there's branches to Dorset. So this crew, the green crew, starts with a trip up to Dorset, and then the green crew switches attention, and they take a way freight down from Cohill to Hackney to Windrum, crossing this black crew. Let's call them the black crew, who are coming up from Windrum. They do their switching here. They meet the other crew here and head up to Cohill, and so it goes. You can draw this kind of thing. Once I found this one, I haven't actually modified it very much. It would be interesting to start from scratch again and see what other things I can come up with. But one of the things I wanted to do was, if there's two crews, as there is when there's guest operators, is to keep them out of each other's way, so that there's like this crew switches, then the other train arrives and they're ready to leave. So they leave town, this crew, the green crew, is ready to switch. So that's one of the considerations I had when I drew this diagram. Here I use a Mac program. It's a free program called Switch List, which has its flaws. Sometimes it forgets where cars are, and before I start an operating sequence, I'll make sure that everything is where it says it is. It's not always true, but anyway, I've only got 25 or 30 cars, so it's not that big a deal. So here's the way freight, one south, so that would be probably this one here, and it's starting picking up cars at Cohill, taking them, in this case, to Windrum. There aren't any cars for Hackney on this particular train. And of course, we like to keep up with the times and looking to the future. We like to have the latest technology here. Oh yeah, that'll be DCC for sure. Oh no, that'll be AirWire. I got to put AirWire in that guy. Okay, next. Here we go. This is the end of the program, and we are at Cohill, and we're going to head off into the sunset shortly. So thanks for listening.